Hello, I'm Mark Ranella, editor at Harvard Business Publishing, and I'm with Yael Grushka-Cockayne, visiting associate professor of business administration at Harvard Business School. I reached out to her a few weeks ago to discuss her course on applied business analytics, but since then we've had a massive move to teaching online in response to the coronavirus. And as luck would have it, she is also very adept at online teaching. Most notably, she taught a MOOC on fundamentals of project management and planning that had an enrollment of about 150,000 students. She's also involved with an important project at HBS around online learning.
I don't know if you're kind of in the loop with what's going around here at HBS, but we're slowly training all the faculty to go online. And so some people have a lot of experience teaching online and some have less. And so those of us with experience have been put in like a task force to try and onboard the faculty. I was supposed to do my first training session tomorrow, but one of the other trainers was unwell. And so I stepped up to do a session today, and I thought it went really well.
Good.
Yeah, like any other teaching online, there were hiccups, but we got through it. So
Right. And you've been there before.
Yes, definitely, yes.
Right. So tell us about that experience today. What did you learn today?
So it was interesting today because we had a very diverse group of folks who joined the training session. So this is like train people online to do online teaching, right? So I had a very useful audience of students. So we had people sign up to become students and to play the role of a student, and that was super helpful.
Right.
I also put the faculty in the what I like to call the driver mode, where they're leading the conversation, and gave them all the hosting Zoom responsibilities to control everything. And I think that hands-on type of experience is the most valuable part of it. And I do something similar when I teach analytics, even in class, as I think you and I have talked about. I've been using Zoom as a method for students to share their screen.
Right.
So again, that's them kind of revealing themselves to the student, to the class, and they're the ones leading with their mouse, and what they show us on the screen is really what we end up talking about, and that for them is a really good experience, and I think that's how they learn the most.
Oh, great. So, we're talking to a lot of people, hopefully, who are making this transition. So I'm going back to your, first experiences. What do you wish you had known before teaching your first online course?
So it's a great question, and I'm trying to remind myself of me 4 or 5 years ago. So first, one thing I don't think I fully appreciated is the different types of classes and instruction that you do online. So in 2015, I recorded a MOOC for Coursera, and I have a course online that is by and large asynchronous, meaning folks watch the videos, they do the assessments, they watch the material, they do the reading, but it's mostly self-led.
Okay.
And putting together a course like that is very different than live sessions and having a conversation, live discussion with 40, 50, 60, 90 people simultaneously. And so just recognizing the sheer difference and richness of the medium, and knowing that online doesn't only mean one thing, I think is really important. And it was hard for me to fully grasp the difference. But now that I do, I recognize that it's almost like a different set of skills. Some people can put together a set of amazing videos for the students to watch that are hugely useful and beneficial. And some people can conduct an online discussion, and those aren't necessarily the same type of capability or the same type of engagement. And it just means that we as faculty or instructors have to choose. We have to think about what it is we're trying to accomplish and what kind of online instruction would be the best for that.
Right, given our own talents or your own talents.
Given our talents, given the material, given our students, given all of the combination of those facets. And even now, teaching analytics, for instance, sometimes I'll say, you know what, we don't have to waste time in class, or I'm not sure that the students will benefit from a discussion. Let's just film a video and give them the URL. And so sometimes we'll do that. And that's like an online delivery. Sometimes we'll have them do some work on their own online. Sometimes there'll be a discussion. So choosing which parts of the conversation and the content, the pedagogy goes asynchronous, discussion and synchronous, or individual work, like that's important and requires some thinking through.
Okay, that's my next question. Like, what are a few keys to success in running a class online? So this assessment of, is it asynchronous? Is it live? And that's one of them, right? Any other that come to mind?
Live discussions are amazingly powerful online, but they also have some limitations, meaning it's only going to last an hour and a half. And the conversation online sometimes is a little bit slower paced than it is in the classroom. And my comparison is a very rapid paced classroom. So when I think of online, I have to think very carefully what it is that I want to use this time for all of us together to accomplish. And so one of the keys to success is be thoughtful about your teaching objectives and your teaching plan, and make sure that you don't overwhelm yourself with trying to accomplish too much in one session. Another thing is that like anything else, it's not going to be perfect. Like even classroom instruction has its mishaps,
Of course, right.
And so acknowledging that and not getting overwhelmed by a video that doesn't work or an audio that doesn't work, and kind of knowing how to deal with that and admit to the students, yeah, we can try again. Let's keep practicing, and kind of having that humbleness about us is always going to be important. But online, I think it's really important because people don't feel totally comfortable and they're not sure how they're going to engage with you. And you want to develop that personal repertoire in a very 2D kind of environment. And so talking about those challenges, acknowledging that you have them too, will make other people who sometimes forget to do something more comfortable.
Right. Sort of being transparent about whatever problems you're running into. I could see in class, right, if you wanted to hand out a 2-page article and for some reason you left it at the office, you could say, oh, I'll make a summary of it. Sorry, I didn't bring it. Here it is. Same kind of thing. Right.
Exactly. Or I forgot this, or right. I mean, we're all people, we're all humans, and online doesn't make us more invincible. And so making students more comfortable about it and, adhering to their sensitivities is always going to be useful.
Well, here's another great transition. So I was going to ask, there's so many people making this transition right now abruptly, students and teachers. So, what are some ways that educators, for instance, can support students, right, who are feeling disoriented, either technically or emotionally?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that's on my mind to try to overcome and master. So I found that having some kind of forum where folks communicate on a regular basis helps. So because we're missing the physical factor of knowing that I'm going to see you in class, things like Slack or Microsoft Teams or other types of team-based communication environments help, because they give you another avenue to reach out to folks. We're going to be together in a discussion, in a synchronous session, let's say for about an hour and a half. But it's going to be with a lot of other students, and that might not give us the opportunity to make sure that everybody's okay and to have like all these other conversations that we want. And so having some other forum to communicate is always going to be helpful. So the Slack, I think, is really helpful opportunity. Also, thinking about schedules a little bit is useful. It's hard to be online for so many hours. Like, your eyes get tired, your voice gets tired. It's different, and you need a break or you need something else to do. And so I have the elective course on analytics. I'm trying to reimagine a few of the classes, maybe not all, to do something like different, to let them work in teams, or to let them do some work in different time zones, or to kind of change the beaten path. So it's not necessarily everybody having to be up and in the Zoom or online at 8:30 in the morning Eastern time. Like it's just not as practical for everybody. And so we have to be thoughtful and creative, and in a way it gives us new opportunities to break some of those habits that we had around everybody being in a physical classroom at once. I'm trying to provide opportunities for that to happen. Until now, I didn't necessarily have to plan for it because they were all expected to be here physically, but now that they were basically sent home or to wherever else they felt safe, now we're going to have a bunch more people scattered around the world. So why not take that to our advantage and say, you know what, instead of showing up at 8:30 tomorrow for class, you make sure that you meet with your team at some given time and work on this assignment.
That's great.
So, so I think it's going to give us some more flexibility to cater to their, to their comforts, and we'll still learn a lot, but just in a different, on a different schedule.
Right. So what are some just sort of maybe unambiguous or really clear advantages of online teaching?
So the first advantage, I think, is kind of related to my previous point, is that like we don't need them all physically here. We
Right.
have our students home with their spouses, their parents, their children, wherever they need to be at a moment of challenge like we're faced with today. And even if it weren't an emergency situation like we have right now, if students could not physically take the time, or they had an emergency, or they had to be somewhere that is not like Cambridge, Massachusetts,
Right.
this way of learning enables them to join and not miss anything. And so I
Right.
think that that's tremendously powerful. And by and large, students and learners are very appreciative for the opportunity to get the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Second, things get recorded and documented. It's easier to keep log. I can annotate an online conversation very
Right.
quickly and go back to my notes. I can have breakout rooms in very creative ways and have them discuss among smaller groups. The technology is tremendously rich,
Right.
and allows us to do things that we're not as naturally doing in our classrooms.
Mm.
Sometimes I like to have my students, as I mentioned, share their own screens. Well, if we're all online, it's just a click of a button and any student in the classroom can share their screen. And so
Right.
they get into really good habits around that.
Yeah, sharing your screen. I mean, I taught, a couple decades ago, a while. That's just not in my repertoire at all. It sounds like such a great thing to be able to say, hey, what's your project? Let's see it.
Show me your analysis. Let's change your analysis. Show me that, and let's edit it together. And
Right.
definitely for analytics that I teach a lot of, but not necessarily only for analytics. I've taught, as I mentioned, my MOOC on Coursera, that's a project management MOOC. So I have a course on project management, and I've taught often like an elective course on that.
Mm-hmm.
And even there, have somebody share their project plan and walk us through the ins and outs of their plan is super insightful and useful for other folks.
Again, thinking about a lot of the teachers who, have been used to being in the classroom. So what things don't work online that people lean on in the classroom? What things have they, have to relearn in a sense when they go online?
Yeah, so the whole notion of lecturing is very different online. So I think attention span has been shown by many to be short. And so if you're gonna lecture and you plan on lecturing, you want to chunk up your lecture into small bits and record them at short instances. The students themselves are likely going to pause and walk away or do something if it's too long. And so recording it, having it saved in a recording format, everybody becomes a little bit more conscientious. If I'm in the classroom, I can muddle my words and I'll just correct myself like I just did.
Right.
But if you record it and it comes out wrong, you suddenly get this overwhelming sense of, oh, it wasn't perfect. So you feel like you need to re-record everything.
Right.
And so, so that sense of being natural, fumbling your words and doing another take and breaking it into smaller chunks is really important in online delivery.
Oh, see, that's not at all obvious, I don't think. I didn't think about that attention span thing at all.
If you're going to do an hour and a half of a class, you have to make it interactive. There is no way, in my mind, and this is only my opinion, there is no way that you're going to keep your students' attention for an hour and a half if you're just talking at them.
Well, I think that's the case in person as well, but when you were talking about the little chunks of attention, that's something that did not come to mind.
Yeah, I agree with you that I'm also a very big skeptic of lecture mode in general. Like even in the classroom, it's hard for people to keep up. But I think the physical presence of people sitting in your room you might have a bigger chance of keeping folks' attention for a little bit longer. Online, it's notoriously hard. Like I can be here on my phone without you noticing. I can be distracted by something else. I can have something in the back. There's just a lot of different things that go on, even if I'm well behaved, so to speak. And so either make it interactive or break it up and have animation, have a video, have like other things for them to keep on segueing through, because we're just not used to single tasking online. We're so used to multitasking online that it's very hard to change that habit.
Oh, I see. Okay. It's sort of like the Amazon effect. Everybody's used to doing things on Amazon. Everybody's used to multitasking when they're online.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Another great segue here. I was just thinking about what teaching approaches are great or, what work well online. You're just talking about interactives, having variety. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so again, videos and links out to the web and being spontaneous works really well online, especially in discussion format, so synchronous classes.
Hmm.
Um, I like to have the students talk and have them, share something about where they're at. So I always like to start off with an icebreaker at the beginning. So what is the temperature where you are at? Or,
Okay.
who's in the coldest location? And all kinds of like jokes like that to kind of get a sense for what people have done to make it to the class. And so there's a
Mm,
really interesting appreciation when you realize that somebody's on vacation in the Bahamas, or somebody's in, skiing somewhere, or just working, all day in Germany, and they log on at 2 a.m. just to be in the class. Then suddenly
mm,
you're like, this is serious. People are really taking their time and waking up in the middle of the night. So we must make it useful for all of us.
mm, mm.
So that's how I like to break the ice. I tend to cold call often. I do this physically as well, but I
Mm-hmm.
also try to bring into the conversation students that I want to make sure are kind of with us. And once you are known for doing that, then they show up for the next class well prepared and ready to go when you cold call them.
Right.
Um, Zoom, which is a very commonly used tool these days, we use it here at HBS. Zoom allows you to have what we call breakout rooms, and I find them hugely beneficial
Mm,
for the online space because it breaks up, again, the class a little bit. It gives us a different dimension. It allows smaller groups to talk amongst themselves,
right.
and everybody gets a voice. Um, One really huge difference, possibly the biggest difference between online synchronous session than an in-class discussion,
Right.
is the chat feature. Some faculty disable the chat. It can be distracting because we're really doing a few things at once.
Right.
But I actually love having the chat window there and having folks debate and discuss and post ideas. Once you get used to it, typically the comments are more additive to the class than distracting. So people post things that just contribute to the main conversation. So for instance, I'll ask, in a class discussion, I might say, give me an example of a company that has X, okay? And whoever I call on may have an example in mind, or might kind of be taking a moment to think of it, because examples are hard to kind of bring to memory
Right.
immediately.
Right.
But the moment a fellow classmate types in something, it triggers a whole waterfall of ideas. And so it really allows them to share their thought process and to really have that creativity and burst of ideas
Hmm.
just get floated out there pretty quickly.
Sort of break the ice, or
Yeah,
get rid of the inertia with one suggestion, right? Then everybody can
yeah.
play on that. Right.
And it's a wisdom of crowds thing. The more people type and the more ideas you have chiming in, the more fruitful the conversation can get.
Mm,
So the chat feature can be really rewarding that way. I monitor it. Meaning I always kind of have it open next to me. If I see somebody typing that hasn't raised their hand or joined the conversation in other forms, I might cold call them and say, hey, you've just typed in the chat, share with all of us what it is that you typed in so we can all benefit. Um, Not everybody can multitask that readily. And so we try to strengthen some ideas that come out of the chat. We can talk about them in the larger forum.
oh,
The
that's good.
chats get saved, so we can also post them later and share them later. But again, it's something that is almost like a narrative that complements the class that in physical presence we don't have. Like
Right.
there, no side conversations, right? Um,
Right. And
so
you can
it,
always get a great idea and bring it up the next class. Right.
yeah, you could, and people do sometimes,
Hmm.
but it's more linear and it's not done in parallel, which is just different.
Right. Right. Yeah. So using chat to spark ideas sounds like one answer to this next question I have, which is, how do you engage students who might not be comfortable in an online environment, right? That
Exactly.
obviously it might be one
Exactly.
way. What are some other ways?
Yeah, so that's exactly right what you just said. So the chat is also a place where some folks who don't immediately raise their hand or speak up, they will prefer to chat, and we can do
Mm,
that. Sometimes and I think I mentioned that I have some folks share their screen, so I kind of push them a little bit more to be that leader of the conversation. And if they know in advance they're going to do that, then they can practice and they can get ready, so they're not like, it's not that I'm surprising them. And I think that helps them get comfortable as well.
Mm.
The small breakout rooms allows them to, you can do like surveys and polls online. That sometimes helps a little bit. I mean, those are the main ways in which you can get students that are uncomfortable
Hmm.
to join.
Right.
It typically takes 1 or 2 times, but eventually people get more comfortable
Okay.
with it.
Yeah, because if they're quiet, for instance, it's not a problem online in a way, because you can type in your idea. You don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
shout it out or anything like that.
True. But I'll cold call. Like I'll look at the list and say, or I'll have, I'll come into class with a list of people who didn't speak last time, and I'll go to them and ask them to join the conversation more proactively.
Gotcha. I think you made an allusion to this earlier about, making sure that you you do other things during the day, that things are tiring sometimes online. But I'm just thinking about, time management tips for teachers, sort of scheduling their day around teaching online, and so they don't get fatigued, or so they are energetic when they come to the online environment.
So I found that online teaching, especially synchronous sessions, and I suspect it's the same for lecturing, but I teach discussion synchronous sessions. So all 100 students are online, and I have them chime in with their perspectives. I find it maybe not as physically demanding as in the classroom, but not far off.
Right.
More than I think people realize. So
Mhm.
it still requires energy levels on my part to deliver the class.
Mm-mm.
I'm concentrating at 2 or 3 screens at once. I have a lot of things going. It's a lot of, attention to multiple parts, and a lot of energy spent on talking to a lot of people. And so not to ignore or neglect your own energy levels and what's required from us as faculty. So
Mhm.
it's not that I can do like a typical day of work and then tag along an online session. If I do too much of that, I will, like, it's tiring. So I need
Right.
to give myself the space the hour or two before to, like, sometimes I go to the gym, or I disconnect in some way, or I come back like fresh and have like a free time an
Mhm.
hour before the class to kind of get in the zone and get in the mood.
Are you saying that sometimes people might consider, here I am with the screen. I know what that's like. That's pretty easy. No big deal. I'll just get
Right.
through the hour and a half. Right? Is that what
Right.
you're saying?
Yeah, like it's a little bit, it's not like just being in your office. While I don't have to walk over to the physical classroom, I still need to be here and deliver and be
Mhm.
on, so to speak. And so
Right. Right.
it's not just another meeting in your office. It still requires teaching energies that you would need for other environments. And
Mm-mm.
so just planning for that, having a little bit of a drink, I have my snacks, I kind of prepare things so I have them here. Actually, that's an advantage. I would never snack when I'm in a
Right.
physical classroom. I sometimes come in with a cup of coffee, but here there's opportunities to kind of, I'm sitting. Not all people sit down. I tend to sit down. Some people stand up in their offices when they're teaching too.
Mhm.
But finding ways to manage your energy and keep yourself going are important in the online space as they were in a physical space.
Gotcha. Well, let's wrap up with a question that I'm sure people worry about, which is academic honesty.
Okay.
In this environment where you're maybe not as present with the students all the time, and who knows where they're getting their information from or how they're producing their work, things like that.
That's a great question. So I like to give the students the benefit of the doubt.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm, wishful thinking here, but I think if you get to students to talk about what they did, so to talk about their work, it's very hard for them to fake. So
Mm.
in my analytics course, I have forecasting competitions. So they have to create predictions, and we have competitions, and the winners win a prize.
Right.
And they are supposed to work as teams. And in a world where you can get code everywhere, who knows where they can find their code,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so what they know is that I'm going to ask them to describe their model, and then I'm going to ask them to motivate why they chose to model things in a certain way, or what kind of
Mm.
experiments they ran. And once you ask them to talk about something, it's very hard to fake. Like if they didn't do the work, it would be obvious.
Right.
And so it's almost like an oral exam has some real benefits that we
Hmm.
just forget over the years, because we're so used to giving handwritten exams
Right.
that we forget that if you just have a dialogue with somebody, who did not put in the work.
Right. That's very good. And that brings back the sort of human element.
Yes.
into this online environment, right? It's
Sure.
there is a lot of humanity involved here. We're not forgetting that.
Right, exactly right.
Okay.
So my sense is that that really helps. Even in group presentations, I have them present as a team, and I have different people answering questions, because you hear them talk about it and articulate their thought process, and you very quickly understand what kind of effort they put into it.